Are you ready? I don't know if I'm ready. No, I'm ready. Let's do it. Okay. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about making things, usually with pretty strings, but not always with pretty string. But today will be about pretty string because it is October, which means it's Socktober, and that means it's time for me to do my yearly heel tutorial. Now I asked you on various platforms what heel you wanted me to show you this year, and undoubtedly the winner was the German band heel. The socks that you see in my main title, the banner of my YouTube channel, it is this sock. This is the sock that you see, and this sock has a German band heel. This is what it looks like. And it kind of looks like a flap and gusset, except notice there's no decrease line. That's right. This is a heel that is worked with a flap, similar to a flap and gusset, but after you've knitted your flap, done your heel turn, picked up stitches along the edge, joined everything back in the round, you end up at the same stitch count as you cast it on, or at least where you started your heel flap. So that means you have a flap sock that is actually really great for things like colorwork. So this sock was knitted cuff down, and you can see that my colorwork from the top up here all the way through my instep, which is this area of the sock, down until I got to my toe shaping is uninterrupted. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and find out how to do a German band heel. As always, as we get started, quick reminder, down in the description box are timestamps to different parts of the video. I always hope that you'll watch through the whole thing at least one time, because you never know what neat tip or trick I might throw in. But sometimes you need to get to something particular, and so I do have timestamps down below. Also in the description box, you will find a list of materials and resources related to today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links, and if you click on one of my links and you do some shopping, I might earn a small commission, which does really help support my channel. So if you utilize one of my affiliate links, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated, as well as any super thanks you might send my way, or using my Ko-fi link. All of these tips, commissions, etc. really do help me continue my mission of spreading the joy and love of making things. Okay, on with the video. Boom, 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 boom. So I want to do a quick overview of how this heel is constructed, because it is going to help you understand what's happening when I actually demonstrate working this heel. The German band heel is really worked in two parts. First, you get up to where you're going to work your heel, and you start working a flap flat. Just like with a flap and gusset, the stitches get divided between your heel stitches and your instep stitches. Traditionally, 50% of your stitches are used to work the flap. And you work a certain number of rows, and then you start doing a little bit of heel shaping on that flap by doing some decreases in the heel. Once you've knitted all of your rows of the flap, you go into doing a heel turn. And the heel turn is worked similar to how you would work a heel turn in a flap and gusset. It is a short row heel where the gaps that are created by short rows are closed with decreases. But the way these decreases are lined up, they're stacked on top of each other, and this is how you get this band underneath the heel, thus the name, the German band heel. So traditionally with this sock heel, this band is worked over 6 or 8 stitches, and throughout the video I'm going to refer to these stitches as the band heel stitches. Whether you work them over 8 stitches like I've done here or 6 stitches is kind of a matter of personal preference, fit, and also how it fits into your overall design. After finishing the heel turn, then you pick up stitches around each edge of the flap, join everything back in the round, and when you're done, like I said before, you end up with the same number of stitches as you started with before you separated your heel stitches from your instep stitches. So now is the big question. How do you know how many rows of your flap and all of that to work in order to get back to the same stitch count? Well, now I have to tell you a little something. This sock does require a little bit of math. Please don't run away. Hear me out, hear me out. First of all, the math, it's not too complicated. It's really not. It's just a couple of formulas. You will find those formulas down in the description box, but also down in the description box, you will find a link to a public Google sheet that I have made up that does all the calculations for you. All the numbers you could possibly need, it does all of it. So you can go to that link, save a copy of the sheet for yourself, and you just plug in whatever numbers you need, and boom, all the math is done for you. So there's really no reason to fear doing this heel because of a little bit of math, because basically I've done the math for you. For this, I am actually going to use a swatch. Well, not a swatch, but I'm going to use this like demo example for my sock so you can clearly see what's going on. Let's do the first bit of math that I need to get started, which is figuring out how many rows all together I have to knit for my heel flap and how many stitches I'm going to work. So I'm going to just work 50% of my stitches. This sample here has 60 stitches times 50%, which is 0.5, and that equals 30. So I'm gonna work my heel flap across 30 stitches. But how many total rows of my flap do I need to work so that when I join everything back in the round, I end up back with 60 stitches? Well, so if I'm working 30 stitches across the heel flap, I'm going to need to work a total of 30 heel stitches minus the 8 stitches in my band. Remember, when we're done, we're going to have 8 stitches here in the heel band left over. So I will have 8 stitches of my original stitch count still existing at the end of my heel turn. So that's for the minus 8. So my total number of rows is my number of heel stitches, in this case 30, minus 8 for 22. So I'm going to work 22 total rows. All right. One last thing I want to figure out though before I start working my heel flap is, remember, we work a certain number of rows plain, and then we start doing decreases. All right, so I have 22 total rows. I'm going to have 16 decrease rows. The number of decrease rows is equal to the number of heel stitches times 2. So 22 minus, I have 8 heel band stitches, so that's 8 times 2, right? So that's 22 minus 16 equals 6. So what that means is I'm going to work 6 plain rows on my heel flap. After I work those 6 plain rows, then I'm going to start doing my decrease rows to start shaping the heel. So let's jump in and start actually working the flap. So the way I'm going to work my heel flap is I'm going to slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to knit across. Every row of the flap, you slip your first stitch. And you slip that first stitch because it's going to make picking up your stitches along the heel flap much easier when we get to that stage. So So I've knit across 30 stitches for my first row of my heel flap. And I've got these instep stitches on the back. On these back 2 needles are my instep stitches. I'm gonna just let those hang out there while I work my heel flap. Turn this around. Again, I'm going to slip the first stitch and I'm gonna purl back. Now I'm knitting this heel flap stockinette, but if you want, you can use heel stitch with it, which I did do with my Fair Isle sock. Personally, I think Eye of Partridge with this heel technique is tricky because of the decreased stitches later on, but if you're adventuresome, that is also an option. We're gonna turn, and I'm gonna repeat those 2 rows 2 more times for a total of 6 rows. Okay, so I have finished knitting my plain rows of my flap, and I'm now ready to do my decrease rows. Hey, Ed and Carrie here. Just a quick reminder about these decreases. I will have a total of 16 decreases when I am done. And I arrived at that number because you take the number of band heel stitches and multiply it by 2. So I have 8 band heel stitches times 2 equals 16 decreases. The thing that I need to figure out about doing my decrease rows is I need to figure out where to place my decreases. Now, if you look at my sock here, you look very closely, you'll see these decreases, there we go, right there. And those decreases line up with the 8 stitches in my band heel. What I need to do is I need to find the center 8 stitches on my heel flap. So my decreases and the band heel stitches are on the center of the flap. You can use math to figure this out for sure, and that formula is down in the description box. However, you don't have to use math. You can just use counting and a couple of stitch markers to help you keep your place. So I have 30 stitches here. Half of 30 is 15, so my middle stitch would be the 15th stitch. Here is my 15th stitch, and that would be the middle of my heel band. So I'm going to count 4 stitches to the right, and that is the first half of my heel band stitches. So I'm going to place a marker on that first stitch. So now that I know this stitch here, I can count from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mark that stitch. So here are my 8 heel band stitches, and I want my decrease lines to be where the 2 markers are. Let's go ahead and we're going to knit our first decrease row. So I'm going to once again slip my first stitch. So I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before my marker. Here's my 1 stitch before my marker, okay? And I'm going to do a knit 2 together, a right leaning decrease. So there we go. The next decrease will be an SSK. So this time I'm going to knit to the marker so that I decrease the last stitch of the heel band stitches with the first stitch of the outside edge stitches. There's my next marker, so I'll do my SSK. So there is my first 2 decreases of my 16 decreases I'll do. And I just work to the end. Okay, so now at the end of my row, I'm going to turn, and my next row of my decrease rows is just a plain purl row. So slip my first stitch and purl across. My first 2 decrease rows, and I'm going to continue that pattern until I have decreased away 16 stitches. I'm back again. I feel like I should explain a little more carefully in terms of this decreasing pattern. Basically, for these decreases, you're decreasing away 2 stitches every right side row. Okay, so it's a 2-row decrease pattern. Row 1, you knit 2, 1 stitch before the marker, knit 2 together, knit to the next marker, do an SSK, work your rest of your stitches, turn. Row 2, you just work back a plain row. Oh, there we go. So that is my heel shaping done on the flap. And if you look at this, you can see that it's kind of starting to take that look of a heel, kind of that curved look that you sort of expect with a heel. So now that I'm at this point, we are ready to start doing the heel turn. I think heel turns are the part of sock knitting that can sometimes throw off newer knitters when it comes to knitting socks. Now, not every heel technique utilizes a short row heel turn, but most of them do. So in this case, right now I have 14 stitches. I have my center 8 band heel stitches here, and then I've got 3 stitches on either side. So what I want to do is I want to turn the heel to create a little cup that goes around your heel in the sock while decreasing away those 6 edge stitches. But it is really just working short rows. But instead of using something like wrap and turn or yarn over or German double stitch, any of those techniques to do a short row, instead you use decreases. Now here I've marked the first stitch and the last stitch of my 8 band heel stitches. And for each short row, what we'll do is we'll decrease a stitch from the edge with the first stitch or the last stitch of the band heel stitches. This will all make more sense as we work this, so let's get it started. Again, we will slip our first stitch because we always slip our first stitch. Short row 1, I'm going to work to the second marker. So here I am, and I just need to fix that. But here is the last stitch of my heel band stitches, and I'm going to do an SSK, decreasing that with the first stitch of my edge stitches to the left side of the heel. And there we go, a little tricky, but we've got it. So now I'm going to turn my work. You can see here I have 2 stitches left on my right needle. I'm going to slip that first stitch as always, and I'm going to purl back to 1 stitch before my next marker. Oops, went too far. And this is why it's good to have a marker at the first and last stitch of the band heel stitches to help remind you where these turns are going to happen. But here I am. This is stitch number 1 of my band stitches. I'm going to purl 2 together. And notice I have 2 stitches left here on my needle as I turn. And that's how I know that I've done all this correctly, is I will have an equal number of stitches outside of the band stitches. Now notice, after I've done my turn, right here, this is stitch number 8 of my band stitches, and then these are my 2 edge stitches, and notice that there is a gap right there, all right? And there's a gap on this side as well. The way we close that gap is by decreasing the band stitch with the edge stitch that's right next to it. That gap will serve as our marker of when we need to decrease and turn. So I'm going to knit up to 1 stitch before the gap, do my decrease, turn, and then I will purl back to 1 stitch before the gap. Decrease and turn. We will do that until all of our edge stitches are gone. So I'm gonna slip my stitch because we always slip the first stitch. Don't take shots every time I say that in this video. All right, so I'm coming up here. I am knitting up to 1 stitch before the gap. There's my gap. There's the 1 stitch before the gap. SSK. those two lovely stitches together, turn my work, 1 stitch is left on the edge. Slip my stitch, because we always, what? Say it with me, we always slip the first stitch. And we're gonna knit to 1 stitch before our next gap. Here we go, there's the gap, there's the 1 stitch before the gap. We're gonna purl 2 together. And notice, once again, there's 1 stitch left over here. So I have 1 edge stitch on either side. So I am doing all of this correctly. Yay! Slip my stitch, you know why. And I will repeat those 2 short rows until all my edge stitches are gone. So that's it, that's the heel turn. It's all done. This is a very shallow heel turn, but that's because this isn't a very large sock. But you can see how that turns now, and that would cut right underneath a foot if this was a giant's foot. I'm basically making a sock for a giant right now. This is obviously a deeper heel turn on this sock because there's actually a lot more stitches involved, but you can see how this cuts right underneath for a heel to sit right inside that. And that would just bend right around the heel so that you can then knit the foot. All right, now that we've done our heel turn, it is time that we start picking up stitches and joining all this back in the round. And when we are done, we should be back to our original 60 stitches. Is she gonna do it? Am I gonna do it? Am I gonna do it? Oh, let's see if I did it all right. Let's see. Remember, the goal of the German band heel is to end up, when we join everything back in the round, to have the same number of stitches as we had when we separated the heel stitches from the instep stitches. Right now we have 30 stitches here on the instep, and we have 8 stitches down here at the heel turn. So we have 38 stitches. So we need to pick up 22 stitches along our edge in order to get back to 60. So 22 stitches is what we need to pick up all together. We're gonna pick up an even number of stitches on both sides of the heel flap. So 22 divided by 2 is 11. So we need to pick up 11 stitches along the heel flap. Now, here's the really cool thing about this. If I've done my math correctly, I should be able to count these slip stitches along the edge, and there should be 11 stitches. Let's find out. Did I do it right? Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is my last slip stitch before I did the heel turn. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes! Wow, applause! Round of applause, round of applause, round of applause. It's 11. Yay! So to do this, I'm actually going to bring in this longer, thinner double pointed needle to pick up stitches with. It's just easier if you use a longer, thinner needle. By the way, these are the Prim ergonomic double pointed needles, and I really enjoy them. I wish they came in shorter lengths. This is 6 inches, and I like my DPN's like more like 5. But anyway, so here's my sock. I've got my longer double pointed needle, and I am going to want to knit across these 8 stitches to this side of my sock. So I want to pick up these stitches first. It's dealer's choice how you pick up into your stitches. You can pick up the front leg that's closest to the front of the work, the right side of the work, or you can pick up in the leg that's farther away from you, that's closer to the wrong side of the work. It doesn't matter which stitch you pick up into. It just matters that you're consistent, okay? I like to pick up towards the back. It's just my personal preference. So I'm going to pick up the back leg here. The other thing that you want to be consistent with is how you pick up these legs, because when you work into them, we're going to actually twist the stitch. I like to pick them up from the front like this, okay? And that means that the right leg is going to look like this, where it looks like the right leg of a stitch is to the back of the needle. That's my preference, because then when I work into this, I'll just work through the front leg and it'll twist this stitch and it'll close up any gap. So I'm gonna pick up my back leg from the front. And I'm gonna pick up 11 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11. And there are my 11 stitches picked up for this edge. One last thing though to remember when you pick up, you might think you want to pick up right here into this stitch, but notice that's a decrease right there. Those are 2 stitches that were decreased together. That is the end of your heel turn. That's not where you want to pick up. You want to pick up on the first stitch of the flap. Get a little confusing sometimes. So now I'm going to take my regular double point needle and I'm just, oh, no, gotta start over here where the yarn is. So, going to, guess what? Slip that first stitch, because you always slip the first stitch. And we're going to knit across my 7 more stitches across the band stitches. So now I'm here at my 11 picked up stitches. So here I'm at my first stitch and I want to make sure that I twist this, okay? So because the right leg here is to the back of the needle, I can knit through the front to twist it. If this was turned the other way, if I had picked up the stitch so the right leg was to the front, I would have to work through the back leg to twist it. But basically, you just want to twist your stitches. And that's going to give me a nice, tidy pickup line along the heel flap. And there we go. All of my stitches are now picked up along the first edge of the flap. I'm going to put that down. I'm going to save that for later. I'm going to bring in my next DPN. And I'm going to start knitting my instep stitches. Those stitches that have just been waiting to rejoin the party. Time to work them. All right, so now I'm back to the next edge of my flap. So now that I'm here, I'm going to bring back in my long, thinner DPN. And I'm going to pick up 11 stitches. Again, I'm gonna be consistent in how I pick up. So I'm gonna pick up from the front, the back leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, yes, it's in the right place. Okay, cool. So I've got my 11 edge stitches back up. I'm gonna take my DPN and we're gonna work across. Again, I'm going to make sure that I work these edge stitches so that those picked up stitches twist. Okay, and there we have it. All of the stitches are picked up and we are joined back in the round. And when I count, I should have 60 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60! Yes! Winner, winner! I did it! I'm back to my original stitch count. Always very exciting when it's like, yes, it worked. And we have all our stitches back up on the needle, and there it is. You can see how it looks here on the giant sock. And at this point, I could just knit the foot of my sock and carry on my merry way until it was time to do toe shaping. No need to do any decreases for a gusset at this point. So that is it. This is the German band heel. And this really is one of my favorite heels that I have ever worked. It was fun. There was just enough challenge of it with the math. If you like math, you can really enjoy this heel because there's a lot of formulas you can use when figuring out for yourself how you want to use it in a sock. But I really just like the look of it as well. I kind of like the way that the foot just kind of shoots off from it and you don't have that decreased line of stitches. For whatever reason, I just find it very appealing. And like I said, this is really great whenever you're working a sock with a stitch pattern where like color work or anything like that, where it's really nice to get back to your original stitch count as quickly as possible. this heel is a really nice way of doing it. One thing about this heel, however, is because you are knitting this flap in order to get to a target number so that you can have the same stitch count as you had when you started the heel, you can't just, to create a deeper heel for a higher instep, you can't just knit a longer flap the way that you can with a flap and gusset. What you can do to customize the size of the heel for your foot is, if you want a deeper heel for a higher instep, you can knit more heel stitches. So for this sock, I knitted 50% of my stitches for the heel, but you can knit as many of 60% of your stitches for your heel, and that will create a longer flap, and you will still get back to a consistent stitch count when you're done utilizing the formulas. And in that Google sheet, I did create a tab for 60%. Let's say you want a shallower heel. Maybe you have a very low instep and you actually want a shallower heel than this. You can use fewer stitches for your heel. You can go as low as 40%. And yes, I have a tab in my Google sheet for that as well. So there are options to customize this heel to fit better if that's what you need. So there's something I have to address. Holey Heels. So when you do sock knitting, something you run into is holes when you are joining work back in the round after a heel. See that right there? That's a hole. That hole happens because there's a bit of a gap that occurs between the heel flap stitches and the stitches at the instep. A lot of times these holes are very frustrating to knitters and you feel like you're doing something wrong. And what do you do about the holes? Well, you've got a couple of options. Option number one with holes, and this is the option that I generally go to. After I'm done and I'm weaving in ends, part of my finishing work is to close up these holes. I just use some yarn and I sew up the hole. And if you do a good job with it, no one will ever know that this little hole was there at one point. If you want to see me demonstrate how I sew up those holes, I did do that in my video on the afterthought heel, and I will link that down below. And up here, you can go right to that section of the video because timestamps are in the description box, and you can see how I closed up that hole. Your other option to close up holes of your sock is when you are picking up stitches, you pick up an extra stitch at the instep. So right here, instead of just picking up my 11 stitches along the flap, I would have picked up an extra stitch in the leg of the stitch over here. And then knitted into that. And then the next round, after everything was joined in, I would do a couple of decreases to decrease those extra stitches away. A lot of people use that technique to great effect. They really like it. It's their favorite way to deal with holes. It's basically a way of closing up the holes right away. I did demonstrate how to do this as well in my video on the afterthought heel if you'd like to watch it. And I will link a couple other videos down below that do a good demonstration of how to pick up additional stitches to avoid those holes in the first place. It's up to you how you want to handle it. Just know if after you're joining the round and you're seeing little holes, it's okay. It's just knitting physics. There are ways to deal with it and you didn't do anything wrong. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos, all great ways to let YouTube know that this is a space worth checking out. It's a great way, free way to support my channel. Also, if you have not already, please make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Clicking the notification bell will ensure that you get notified whenever I upload a new video or start a live stream. If you'd like to take your support a step further, you can always use one of my affiliate links down in the description box. These are clearly indicated. If you click on one, it'll take you to a website. If you do a little shopping, I might earn a small commission. or you can leave me a super thanks or buy me a coffee. So that is it for me today. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be joining me. As always, happy health and happy making. Bye.